Welcome to Starting a Nonprofit 101. We're so glad you're here. The purpose of this tutorial is to define and give an understanding of what it means to be a nonprofit, review the types of nonprofit, give an overview of the steps to gaining nonprofit status, and finally, and most importantly, we hope this tutorial helps to answer the question, do I really need to start a nonprofit organization to meet my goals? Let's get started. Here's a little bit about me. I'm Nancy Frank Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Oral Health Coalition. If you want to read more about me, you can pause it or go to our website at minnesotaoralhealthcoalition.org. Thanks. Here's a review of what we're going to be talking about today. What does it mean to be a nonprofit? So when you hear the words, they're a nonprofit organization or a nonprofit agency, what does that mean? We'll give some examples of nonprofit organizations. We'll talk about the IRS code, section 501c3, 501c6. We also cover 501c4, the public charity, public benefit aspect of a nonprofit, and then the reasons why the IRS will grant you nonprofit status. The organization is charitable, religious, educational, things like that. In Minnesota, here's some examples of nonprofit dental organizations. We have Apple Tree Dental, Hope Dental Clinic, Northern Dental Access Center, Children's Dental Services, Community Dental Care, the Minnesota Dental Hygienists Association, and we can't forget the Minnesota Oral Health Coalition, which is also a 501c3. There are three primary types of nonprofit organizations. In Minnesota, when people ask, is that organization a nonprofit, or people say, we're a nonprofit organization, they're usually referring to a 501c3. That's a tax-exempt business that operates for certain purposes, and we'll go into that further in slides to come. This is the nonprofit that can accept donations and can give someone a receipt for a donation. They can write it off on their taxes. They can also accept grants, and that's one of the main reasons that many people started a 501c3. A 501c4, there's two types of organizations. There's social welfare organizations and local associations of employees. So like homeowners associations and volunteer fire companies fit into that. And then the 501c6, it's really a status that's reserved for what we call business leagues or organizations of business members. They're tax exempt, but they're very different from the 501c3. It's not that uncommon to find an organization that's a 501c6 that has a partner organization that's a 501c3. So one of the big issues with the 501c3 is that under the tax code, a 501c3 organization is not allowed to lobby. They're not allowed to promote candidates. They're not allowed to tell legislators or lawmakers to vote for a certain bill. Now, with the 501c4, they may lobby and promote candidates. Donations and contributions are not deductible. However, contributions may be deducted as a business expense. And some of this gets a little bit in the weeds, and it's always for an accountant. The 501c6 lobbying is its sole activity. It does not accept donations, not organized for profit organizations, and none of the net earnings may benefit anyone within the organization. 501c3 nonprofits are limited to conducting only insubstantial lobbying efforts, I call that education, determined by the size of the organization. Typically, insubstantial means that you would allow less than 10% of the nonprofit total operating budget to insubstantial lobbying or educating. And here's the big one. One of the reasons we wanted to do this tutorial was to answer this question, or help you to answer this question. Why start a nonprofit, and then do I really need one? One reason to start a nonprofit, a 501c3 or 501c4, 501c6, is that you have a tax-exempt status. So it's a corporation that does not pay taxes. A 501c3 organization accepts donations. And what that means is the person that gave you that donation can deduct that on their taxes. The other thing about a 501c3 organization is that they are the type of organization that can receive grant funding. And again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. In Minnesota, if you're not going to raise more than $25,000 of donations in a year, and all your activities are performed by volunteers, you do not need to register as a charity in Minnesota. If you do this, you won't be eligible for federal 501c3 status, so you can't apply for grants. But let's just say you want to raise some money for a new ball field in your town, and you're hoping to raise $10,000. There's no need to start a nonprofit for that. Just an example. Here's some stipulations, or here's some of the key factors that the federal government will look at when they determine whether or not you are eligible to be a 501c3. One of the biggest issues is the purpose of the organization. Congress enacted Section 501 of the tax code to recognize how nonprofits expand on the services government provides. That section lists 7 purposes for which a nonprofit can be organized and be exempt from federal income tax. Those are charitable, religious, educational, literal or literacy programs, scientific, prevention of the cruelty of animals or children, fostering of international or national sports competitions at the amateur level, and public safety testing. To earn the 501c3 designation, a nonprofit's charter or articles of incorporation must declare 3 stipulations: that the purpose of the organization is a Section 501 purpose, that the organization's assets are permanently dedicated to that purpose, and that the organization's activities are limited to those directly related to its Section 501 purpose. So what they're saying is we want you to be very specific that you're applying for 501c3 status for a certain reason, and that's what you're going to do. Those are your activities. And as we mentioned, in order to be a 501c3, the organization's assets have to be dedicated to that purpose. The activities have to be limited to the purpose directly stated in your Articles of Incorporation. So, here's the big question. Do you need a nonprofit organization to reach your goals? So what we're saying is, after this tutorial and talking to an accountant and maybe a lawyer, you can assess if it's necessary. What does the nonprofit status do for you? Do you need a nonprofit tax status to get your accomplishments done? Is there a strong difference between a for-profit business and a nonprofit in terms of what you want to get accomplished? And can you do what you need to do by using a fiscal agent? And just briefly, a fiscal agent is a 501c3 organization that agrees to be your fiscal agent, your bank, your accountant for that grant. And not all 501c3 organizations want to be a fiscal agent. Many do not want to get into that business. And some 501c3s find that as a way for them to make some money and reach their status a little bit broader in terms of working with other groups and partnering. And it's something we can look into further if you decide, look, I don't want to start a nonprofit, but I do want to explore that fiscal agency. That might be the way for us to go. As we said at the beginning, this is an overview, but these are basically your steps or your to-do list to starting a nonprofit, a 501c3. You're going to create, define, recruit a board of directors. You're going to name the organization. You're going to write and file articles of incorporation. You're going to incorporate. You're going to create a business plan and a budget. And you're going to write corporate bylaws, apply for your federal tax ID number, and file for your income tax exemption from the IRS. And finally, you're going to register as a charity in Minnesota. So there they are. Sometimes I look at something like this, and we've all been there. There's that place where we are, there's that place where we want to be, and we know between the two is a lot of work. It is a lot of work to start a nonprofit. However, if it's right for your organization, if it's right for your mission, it's a labor of love, and you'll get it done and you'll do a great job. One of the first things we do is we look at our vision statement. They are required for our articles of incorporation and bylaws. What I like to say is 5 words or less. Some people go a little bit wordier. 5 is great. What we want with a vision statement is that it's broad enough in case your mission grows and expands, but it's narrow enough so that when the IRS reads your application, they can determine whether or not you meet the standards of a 501c3. We also want our vision statement to put us apart from other organizations. Especially in dental or in oral health, there are a lot of nonprofits. So let's make sure the vision statement distinguishes you from another nonprofit. And we always want to make sure that our vision statement is kind of a public relations tool, demonstrates the need, the benefit. Here's some examples. Feeding America. Their vision is a hunger-free America. Alzheimer's Association, a world without Alzheimer's. The Multiple Sclerosis Society, a world free of MS. Our friends at the Minnesota Dental Foundation, eliminate unmet oral health needs in Minnesota. These are fantastic. A just world without poverty. For the MOHC, ours is an optimal oral health for all Minnesotans. So as you can see, these are sort of taglines. These could be a part of a public relations campaign. But when we look at them, we are certain that we know the topic that these organizations deal with. Feeding America, Hunger-Free America. The vision statement tells us about this organization, tells us about their vision, but it doesn't so heavily define them. For instance, with Oxfam, a just world without poverty. So we can assume that has to do with justice and helping people out of poverty, but it doesn't put them in a corner where they have to do very specific tasks in order to accomplish that. I think you get what I mean. So our next step is to recruit a board of directors. The board of directors are very important. Oftentimes people start a nonprofit, it's 1 or 2 people, they find a friend, they create the board of directors. I really frown upon that. Board of directors are very important, and I think anything you can do to get a well-rounded, professional group of people on your board of directors, it will really benefit your organization, especially in the long term. So our board of directors, they create the mission and vision. They do not have compensation. They're responsible for written policy and procedures. The Minnesota Oral Health Coalition, we have a policy and procedures manual for our organization, and it's on our website. So I welcome you to go and take a look at it or download it. You can use it as a template if you like it, or it can give you some ideas. A board of directors in Minnesota has to have at least 3 members. I personally don't like a board of directors over 11 people, and I would stick with an odd number. So for me, 7, 9, 11, 9 and 11 to me are perfect. It gives you enough board of directors so that you get a diverse group of people, and it allows you to also recruit people that have different skill sets that they're going to bring to your board. You must have a chair and a treasurer. Most 501c3s have what we call an executive committee of a chair and a co-chair, or a president and vice president, and then a treasurer, secretary. It's up to you, but I really like the idea of a 4-person executive committee for a number of reasons. One of the main responsibilities of a board of directors is actually to support the executive director. And when you have a 4-member executive committee, that executive director just has 4 people instead of 2 or 3 that are advising them and being close confidants with them. So a board of director their number one responsibility is fiduciary. It's money. If you serve as a board of directors, when you're recruiting board of directors, please know that that's their number one responsibility to you and the organization, and frankly, the state of Minnesota and the federal government, is that they're going to make sure that money is spent wisely and within the rules and the policy and procedures. When we look at board of directors, 501c3s, there is no compensation for them. They have a very strong fiduciary responsibility. They're also there to support the executive director. I strongly recommend that board of directors obtain or get board training at least every other year. And if that means that the same board member has had training 6 times, that's fine. But my experience with working with boards is that most people don't understand the role of a board of director. They just don't understand it. And that causes a lot of problems in nonprofit organizations. We've got fantastic resources in Minnesota, and there's no shortage of excellent consultants and organizations that can do that training. So that's my little plug. I really do recommend that. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to name your organization. And you're going to go to the Secretary of State's website. And I'm going to click this so you can see what we're looking at here. So when I say research names, what we're going to do is we're going to look for names. Let's just say, for example, that you'd like to start a nonprofit, and it's called the Minnesota Oral Health Coalition. So you're going to do a search. You say, is this available? Can we get this name? And we look, and we say, nope, we can't. It's already an active business status. It's a nonprofit corporation. And it's already a business in Minnesota, so we can't do that. So this gives you an idea, and you can just keep searching until you find a name that is not already taken, that fits your purpose and vision. It's going to cost you $35 to reserve your name. The really great thing about the Minnesota Secretary of State's website and the work that they do is that all their business filings are online, and they are very gracious. They actually send you reminders when it's time for you to update your business filings, which is really fantastic, especially for people who are busy, like most of us are. You'll get an email and it'll say, it's time for you to pay attention to these filings. And you click on it and go to their website, and you can do it all there, and you can pay for it all there. It's very nice. All right, the next step for us is that you're going to write your articles of incorporation. Articles of incorporation, very basically, are similar to bylaws, except they're our legal and public record of how the organization is to be managed. They must be written and filed before seeking tax-exempt status with the IRS. It's part of incorporating in Minnesota. You have to have your articles of incorporation to incorporate in Minnesota, which is $70. And this is part of the annual filings with the Secretary of State. Many, many people get confused between articles of incorporation and bylaws. And if you do some research, you'll find out that oftentimes articles of incorporation and bylaws are very similar, almost too similar. And how I like to look at this is the articles of incorporation are just what they say. It's a public record, it's a legal record of your organization and how it's going to be managed. It's what's needed to file. Your bylaws are the record of how the organization is to be managed that's kept for the organization. Bylaws can be changed. We don't change our articles of incorporation, but a board of directors may decide to change bylaws. I don't recommend it very often. To me, changing a bylaw is something you do as really a last resort, but sometimes there's changes to an organization, especially as it grows in the first 5 or 10 years, and it may be necessary. So that's something, just for you to think about when you write your bylaws and you file your articles of incorporation. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to write your business plan and create a budget for your organization. It's actually required as part of the IRS Form 1023, your application for a tax-exempt status. It is your plan that describes how your organization currently is, how it's set up, and the roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years. With our business plan, we're also saying, look, this is how we plan to meet our goals. You also need your business plan and budget to obtain loans and grants, attract donors. It's something, if you're recruiting board members, for them to look at that. And as we know, when we have a plan and we have a budget, it keeps us on track. Some organizations, when they begin, they use this as a time to do strategic planning and work with someone. And that's not a bad idea. And out of that strategic planning can be the business plan and the budget. In here, what we talk about is IRS Form 1023, application for tax-exempt status. Many times you'll see or you'll hear referred to as 1023-EZ. And you're saying, well, EZ, which form do I have to complete? Do I do 1023 or 1023-EZ? You are allowed to file a 1023-EZ if you believe that your projected gross annual receipts will be less than $50,000 in any of the next 3 years. If your total assets exceed $250,000, there's not a question. You have to form the file 1023. Again, something to talk to an accountant about, but I just wanted to mention that as you go forward and you do some exploring into this. Corporate bylaws. So these are your articles of incorporation. They're required for Minnesota state law for nonprofits to have. You have to submit them with your IRS tax filing application. What I hear most common when I look at bylaws is a lawyer wrote them. And what that usually means is the lawyer Googled them. And I'm sorry if you have a great lawyer and they actually did write them, because there are great lawyers who actually write them. But Google should not be the author of your bylaws. It's great to do your research. It's great to work with someone. I highly recommend working with someone who's got the experience. But to take them off the internet can be real detrimental to your organization. Take the time to make sure you have really great bylaws that can grow with your organization and truly reflect who you are, your mission, your vision. Next, you're going to need to apply for a federal identification number, your EIN. You're going to need that for your bank accounts. Organization must be incorporated before applying for your EIN. That's why we have these in steps. You have already applied for your and got your articles of incorporation in Minnesota. It's required for grants and loans and the tax-exempt status application with the IRS. All right. So now you're ready to apply for your tax-exempt status from the IRS. And I could really go into this, but that's probably for another tutorial. This is the biggie, as we say. This is the big application, the Form 1023 or the Form 1023-Z that I just spoke about. There's a number of steps involved. Patience is really helpful during this time. Their filing fee can be $400 to $850, and that depends on your bank account. You're going to write a narrative, and that narrative is very important. It's very important. You're going to have your officers, your directors, your board members, compensation reporting, and your financials. So everything that we've done before this step has been necessary to get you here. Again, when you're ready, you're going to look into this, obviously, much closer. But just to give you an idea, I've heard a lot of people say it's very expensive. Well, it can be. It can be up to $850 just to file. And then you've got $70 to incorporate in Minnesota, $35 to get your business name in Minnesota. And then if you're going to hire someone who is an expert In nonprofits, that's going to be some cost there as well, unless you can find someone who can do it for you pro bono. And there are people that will do that. Then you're going to register as a charity in Minnesota. I hope you're still with me. I know this is a lot. But hopefully you can spend some more time with this tutorial, look a little bit deeper into this PowerPoint presentation as well. You need to register, you must register for charity as a charity in Minnesota before you solicit contributions, unless you believe that you're going to raise less than $25,000, as we talked about before, and you don't need to give people receipts for donations. This is done through the Minnesota Attorney General's office. You need your IRS determination letter, your articles of incorporation, your financial statements to file as a charitable organization's registration statement. And it's a $25 fee. And then every year, when you do your taxes as a nonprofit, you also have to do a report to the Minnesota Attorney General's office. And after someone's done their state and local taxes, the report to the AG's office is not difficult. It's just one more step that you have to make sure that you take every year to remain a charity in Minnesota. So this is one way to look at the experience that you'll have if you go forward. And we hope that you are somewhere between uninformed and an informed optimist at this point. We certainly don't want you to crash and burn. I don't think you're going to. But I think if you follow these steps and you take some time with them and you understand that everything that you put into this process, you're going to get out of it. You're going to get out of your great board of directors, having a clear vision and mission, knowing what you're going to do. It's going to make you more attractive to funders, and in every way, it will help you as an organization. Do you have questions? What will you do now? What else do you need? You can always contact me. I'm happy to answer questions. In Minnesota, we have the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. You could look into that organization. We also have an organization called Propel for Nonprofits. They're an amazing group, and all they do is support nonprofits in Minnesota. They have paid staff. You can either get some free advice from them. They're also great consultants to hire. So between the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits and Propel Nonprofits, I ask you to take a look at them. You can also go to the AG's website, the Secretary of State website, look at that. And as I said, if you want a copy of a sample bylaws, policy and procedures manual, go ahead and go to our website and you can take a look at those. So that's it. Starting a Nonprofit 101. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.